Hi there everyone and welcome to Thinking Agile, a place where we take real world problems when trying to implement Agile within the working environment. We will then submit those to our professional Scrum trainers who will then explain what methods they would suggest to use within that scenario. You can submit your questions to agile@adaptdev.co.uk or you can go to our website and use our contact form. We will then try to notify you if your question has been answered.
Hello, and thanks again to Ty for communicating with all our contacts and clients out there. Keep this question sessions rolling. And the question we're going to look at today is one that's coming asking what tools, and the online tools specifically, are available out there to do planning over multiple sprints for the duration life of a product. Okay. And I'm going to look at this maybe slightly differently than what maybe the questioner was intending to ask, right? So it's not just going to be about online tools, because I might take a slightly different view than saying, here's the perfect tool, and then go fit yourself into that, right? So I actually take that diametrically opposed view to that. So we have a document called Planning in Scrum as part of our resources on our website, and I think we'll ensure that you get the link to it from this. And as part of this little bit of a chat here, I'm going to refer to that document now and again. As you can see, what's up in the background here is one of the pages on that, and that's the various planning levels that occur within Scrum. So let's take this from the view of planning in Scrum as the moment, as opposed to online planning in Scrum, and with the specific terms of onlineness to it, right? And see, how do we plan, first of all? So you can see here, when we look at the planning levels, there's multiple planning levels within Scrum, right? There's the planning level that's owned by the whole Scrum team. So that's from the release plan, coming in from the product backlog down out to the day and delivery based on a daily plan. That's owned by the complete Scrum team, right? Top of that is owned by the product owner. That's their product backlog going into the release plan. And then the sprint backlog and the daily plan is owned by the development team. So that's multiple levels that we're looking at planning on in Scrum, right? And this is a continuous plan. This is, so rather than the world of what a lot of people are used to in project planning, where a plan is created up front and then work is carried out to the plan, right? The plan is a constantly evolving living artifact within Scrum and within Agile ways of working as a whole, right? So in the backlog side of things, you can see where to raise something from an idea stage to something that's deliverable. And I'm avoiding using the stage bottom to top because things can come in at different levels. But it tends to be when things come on a backlog, they come on the backlog as an idea rather than a well thought out item that could be delivered tomorrow. Right? So it has to go through that stage of going from idea, we think this bit of functionality, this feature, having a reverse gear on a car would actually be useful, right? Or have a reverse gear on a motorbike. There's some motorbikes with reverse gears. They're so heavy, so there's some use in it. So it comes in as an idea. And then to specify that along the levels till it becomes potentially deliverable within any sprint going forward is the goal of bubbling up that product backlog item idea, generally from what we see at the bottom of the backlog up to the top 10% that's in a ready state that can be delivered, right? So it may come in vague. We'd like a reverse gear for a motorbike. Go do some research into what that actually means and understand how it could be brought into the next release. Does it have an impact? Could you do some impact mapping? Could you do some story mapping? Could you start estimating? Is there any kind of specification by example you could do out there? Is there any previous examples of this and what was work required in doing so? What is the engineering work required in bringing in a reverse gear to a gearbox that's designed for a motorbike or a clutching system in that way? Right? And once you understand all of that, you could see that at some point it could be brought into the next sprint. Right? And what's in that top 10%. There's no guarantee it's going to become within that next sprint, because it might not satisfy what's classed as being the sprint goal to deliver the business functionality that the product owner wants to get out of that sprint cycle. But that's how we would plan to raise something up. And then how do we plan to go across that from, so what's a good thing to look to separate for what do we think would make a good goal for this next upcoming sprint? Is there any goals that come for the sprints beyond that, sprint N plus, N plus plus, next plus one, next plus two type of an attitude? And here's a technique called 3 sprint planning horizon. And that allows you to, and we think about horizons here as in curvatures of the earth, because you can't see perfectly. The world is not flat, so you cannot see perfectly into the distance using a telescope in the same way as you can see 3 feet in front of you, right? There is a curvature to the earth, and as you move towards things, things might become known that you don't know right now, okay? So when we talk about this 3 sprint planning horizon, we talk about 3 of your sprint cycles, not whatever they regularly have to be. The next one you're likely to do, as I said, since most things are in a ready state, you could probably be on 90% on that, through to about 20% on a sprint that's 3 away from you, right? So this is a technique that we call 3 sprint planning horizons that will allow you to look into that, right? Using a triage board is another type of technique that you could use, where looking more about how do you bring items into your backlog. Well, you could capture, the idea. So as I said about, reverse gears in a motorbike, let's talk something that is computer here. Like look at Splunk, which is an analytics type of monitoring package for most server environments, right? So you could say capture the side, we want to introduce Splunk. You could define that, Splunk for analytics, refine that, say how does that impact the rest of the system? What's the overhead of actually having it, with it running on there and installing it in the first place? Is there any security data implications? And once you answer those, maybe it's ready to then go in your backlog, right? So this is another technique for bringing things in called a triage board. And another one, a further one beyond that, is what we would class as being dependency mapping, right? And here what you have, again, we've gone back to this idea of this 3 sprint planning horizon. So maybe that's a release, or maybe you're releasing every day and you're just trying to slot these up. And here you can see where there's maybe dependencies going across. And if you bring a certain item in that, so dependency 30, item 302 has a dependency on 312. Is that the one they're looking at here? Oh no, they're saying their dependency, item 312. So in here, item 312 has a dependency on the people, Paul. So if Paul's not around, how can you actually deliver it, right? And there, item 355 has a dependency on item 311. So you can choose either if you want to sign in using Facebook, right? But, oh God, I wouldn't actually look into this, right? So here, as we can see on this one, dependency mapping, you can actually see that across these, you can have different types of dependencies, and you can lay your items out as in your columns. This is what we're hoping to do as a plan. You can plot dependencies on there, and you can start to understand, can we deliver this and item go live without having a further dependency? If it does have a dependency from sprint N to sprint N plus, can we either bring the item into sprint N, or can we delay the release until the end of sprint N plus? So these are the objectives you can start looking at once you start doing dependency mapping. And that's just another type of story mapping, right? So and this is on the document there that's for you. So then what I would say beyond that is if you start from that perspective of what's the right type of planning for the works for us as a team, right? Then you can start to see, well, what online tools will provide us the functionality that we need for that, right? Now that might be an Atlassian setup like a Jira, Confluence, it might be a rally board system, it might be Trello, it might be version 1 or multiples of the other, Monday.com or many of the other kind of standard planning boardings out there that gives you your backlog. And quite a lot of them now have plugins to allow you to do what's called story mapping. So the technique of story mapping is a lot more important than understanding the tool, right? Because all those the basic systems that we showed you there are some form of story mapping. Now, coming into this, you could start also looking at things like Mural, right? Mural would allow you to create your own story map and work with that and lay that out as you wish. Or there's idea boards if you just want to come up with ideas and actually then start taking votes from the people in maybe a workshop that you're running to try and bubble up, well, which is the ones we are important to us and we want to work on. And we'll get some of these links in the description below for you to give you a chance to look off on that. But all these tools exist, but what I would suggest to you is work out the system that works for you first, and then from there find out, well, what tool allows you to actually implement that, rather than going and choosing the tool and then forcing your team to work within the environment of your tool. Because quite often you'll find that a lot of these products are designed in a certain way because a lot of them have history. And if you start off from the perspective, oh, we're going to sign up to this batch of tools, then you then need to work out as a team, how do we work with all these tools? And you might find that there is some difficulties in fixing your working practices to suit the tools, right? But that's common. And again, that would be specific to your environment and very hard to discuss here in a generalized type of thing. But we're always here if you wish to contact us and get in touch and ask those specific questions. Thank you.